Imagine stopping for a simple meal after a long day, only to become the target of someone who believes intimidation is entertainment. In a crowded burger restaurant, one reckless stranger crossed a line that silenced the entire room, convinced the woman sitting alone would do nothing. He mocked her, humiliated her, and treated her with complete disrespect, never realizing he had chosen the worst possible person to provoke. What followed wasn't the loud confrontation anyone expected, it was a chain of events that exposed arrogance, consequences, and the danger of judging someone before knowing who they truly are. By the time the truth came out, one careless decision had changed everything. But how did an ordinary meal turn into a moment no one in that restaurant would ever forget? For most people, Ronda Rousey was the face of relentless determination. The world knew her as an athlete who had built a reputation through years of discipline, sacrifice, and resilience. But outside the spotlight, she valued something much simpler than championship belts or public attention. She appreciated quiet moments that allowed her to blend into everyday life without cameras following every move. That afternoon had been one of those rare opportunities. After finishing a demanding schedule, Ronda decided to stop at a neighborhood burger restaurant. It wasn't a celebrity hotspot or an expensive dining destination. It was the kind of place where families grabbed lunch after school, construction workers took their breaks, and travelers stopped for a quick meal before continuing their day. She wore casual clothes, no flashy accessories, and nothing that immediately announced who she was. Most customers barely glanced in her direction. She liked it that way. The restaurant buzzed with ordinary life. Employees hurried behind the counter, the smell of grilled burgers filled the air, and conversations blended into a steady background hum. It felt peaceful, almost refreshing. For the first time in days, there were no interviews, no cameras, and no expectations. Just an ordinary meal in an ordinary place. But ordinary moments can disappear in seconds. Across the dining area sat a small group of young men whose behavior had already made several customers uncomfortable. They laughed louder than everyone else, shoved chairs around carelessly, and seemed determined to draw attention wherever they went. Their confidence wasn't built on respect. It came from believing nobody would challenge them. Most people chose to ignore them. Parents quietly encouraged their children to focus on their food. Elderly customers kept their eyes on their trays. Even the restaurant staff appeared hesitant, hoping the group would finish eating and leave without creating problems. The atmosphere carried a tension that everyone could feel but nobody wanted to acknowledge. Among the group was one man who seemed especially eager to entertain his friends. Every few minutes he searched the room for someone new to mock, smiling whenever he noticed people avoiding eye contact. To him, discomfort was amusing, and silence looked like fear. Then his attention settled on the woman eating alone. She looked calm, focused only on her meal, offering no reaction to the noise around her. To him, that quiet confidence looked like weakness. He assumed she was just another customer who would keep her head down rather than risk a confrontation. He couldn't have been more mistaken. Without knowing her name, her background, or what she had overcome throughout her life, he decided she would become the next target of his performance. His friends leaned forward, sensing that he was about to do something reckless. A few nearby customers noticed the same thing and exchanged uneasy glances. No one realized that the next few moments would transform a routine lunch into an unforgettable lesson about arrogance, consequences, and the cost of judging someone by appearances. The restaurant had grown quieter without anyone realizing it. Conversations faded into whispers as more customers noticed the young man standing from his table. His friends leaned back with amused expressions, already expecting another scene that would entertain them for a few minutes before everyone returned to eating. He walked slowly through the dining area, enjoying the attention. Every confident step reinforced the belief that no one would challenge him. The employees exchanged nervous glances but stayed behind the counter, hoping the situation would end before it became dangerous. The woman remained focused on her meal. Her calmness irritated him. Some people mistake composure for weakness, and that dangerous assumption was exactly what fueled his confidence. He stopped beside her table, invading her space without a word. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Then he deliberately lifted his shoe and planted it onto the edge of her tray, inches from the untouched burger. Gasps echoed across the room. Parents instinctively pulled their children closer. Several customers reached for their phones but hesitated, uncertain whether recording would help or make things worse. A manager took a cautious step forward before freezing, afraid that intervening might escalate the confrontation. The young man smiled, feeding off the discomfort surrounding him. His friends laughed loudly from across the restaurant, encouraging him to push even further. To them, humiliating a stranger was entertainment. They believed fear was the same as respect. The woman slowly looked up. There was no panic in her expression, no anger, no pleading, only a level of focus that made a few nearby customers feel something was about to change. Still, the young man couldn't read the warning written across her face. He had already convinced himself he controlled the moment. The more silent she remained, the bolder he became. Around the restaurant, people began wondering why she wasn't reacting. Was she frightened? Was she trying to avoid making things worse? Or was she simply waiting? Seconds felt like minutes. The atmosphere became almost unbearable. Even the laughter from the man's friends started to fade as they noticed the unusual stillness surrounding the table. Confidence slowly turned into uncertainty, though none of them understood why. One elderly customer quietly stood and guided his wife toward the exit. Another family stopped eating altogether. The room had transformed from a casual lunch spot into a place where everyone sensed they were witnessing the beginning of something unforgettable. Then the woman carefully placed her napkin beside her tray. She stood, not with panic, not with rage, with complete control. For the first time, the young man's smile disappeared. He had expected an easy target. Instead, he was standing across from someone whose calm confidence suggested she had faced far greater challenges than one arrogant stranger in a burger restaurant. And within the next few moments, everyone watching would discover that appearances can be dangerously misleading. The lesson he was about to learn would spread far beyond the walls of that restaurant, and it would begin with a single unexpected move. The room became so quiet that the hum of the kitchen equipment was suddenly impossible to ignore. The young man had expected panic. Instead, he found himself staring at someone whose confidence never wavered. As the woman calmly stepped away from her chair, every eye in the restaurant followed her. There was no rush, no shouting, and no desperate attempt to prove herself. That quiet composure unsettled him more than any threat could have. His friends stopped laughing. For the first time since entering the restaurant, uncertainty spread across their faces. The woman gently moved the contaminated tray aside, ensuring no employee would have to clean up the mess she hadn't created. She then looked directly at the young man, not with hatred, but with the unmistakable expression of someone who refused to be intimidated. Around them, customers who had remained silent moments earlier began standing. One after another, witnesses stepped forward. Several had recorded the entire incident on their phones. Others quietly confirmed what they had seen. The balance of power shifted almost instantly. The young man's confidence crumbled. He realized the room was no longer watching for entertainment. It was watching for accountability. The restaurant manager finally approached, no longer alone. Employees gathered nearby, supported by customers who made it clear they would not tolerate intimidation. The atmosphere that had been filled with fear only minutes earlier was now filled with determination. The woman remained composed throughout it all. She never needed to raise her voice. She never needed to make threats. Her calm refusal to be humiliated became the strongest statement in the room. The young man looked around, searching for the approval he had enjoyed only moments before. Instead, he found disappointed faces, cameras still recording, and friends quietly distancing themselves from his actions. The audience he had hoped would celebrate him had become witnesses to his own disgrace. The reality finally reached him. One reckless attempt to dominate a stranger had exposed his own character instead. As restaurant staff contacted the authorities, he stood frozen, understanding that the consequences were no longer something he could laugh away. The videos would outlive the moment. The witnesses would remember every detail. The lesson he intended for someone else had become his own. And as the restaurant slowly returned to life, one truth echoed louder than anything that had happened that afternoon. Real strength isn't measured by the ability to intimidate others. It's revealed by the courage to remain calm when intimidation fails, and by the willingness of ordinary people to stand together when someone refuses to be treated with dignity. What happened next would ensure that this wasn't remembered as the day fear won, but as the day silence finally ended. By the time the authorities arrived, the atmosphere inside the restaurant had completely changed. Only minutes earlier, fear had kept nearly everyone silent. Now, witnesses calmly shared what they had seen. Videos captured from different angles told the same story. There was no confusion, no exaggeration, and no room for excuses. The young man's attempt to humiliate a stranger had unfolded in front of dozens of people, and the truth spoke for itself. The restaurant staff thanked the customers who had stepped forward instead of looking away. Their willingness to support someone they had never met reminded everyone in the room that courage is often contagious. It takes only one person to stand firm before others realize they can do the same. The woman quietly collected her belongings. She didn't celebrate. She didn't seek attention. She didn't need applause. Her greatest victory wasn't proving she was stronger than the person who tried to intimidate her. It was proving that dignity doesn't disappear simply because someone else tries to take it away. As she walked toward the exit, several customers nodded with quiet respect. Some smiled, Others simply watched, realizing they had witnessed something larger than a disagreement inside a restaurant. They had seen the moment when intimidation lost its power because it failed to silence its target. In the days that followed, recordings from the incident spread across social media. Millions of people watched the same few minutes from different perspectives. But the discussion wasn't just about one restaurant or one reckless decision. It became a conversation about how quickly people judge strangers, how easily groups encourage harmful behavior, and how important it is for bystanders to refuse to normalize public humiliation. Many viewers admitted they had remained silent during similar moments in their own lives. Others shared stories of being targeted because they looked different, spoke differently, or simply seemed vulnerable. While every experience was unique, one lesson appeared again and again: injustice grows louder when good people convince themselves that staying quiet is the safest choice. The restaurant itself became known not for an act of cruelty, but for the people who ultimately chose compassion over indifference. Employees received praise for cooperating with investigators, and customers who had recorded the event helped ensure that facts, not rumors, defined what happened. The woman never tried to become the center of attention. She returned to her normal life carrying the same quiet confidence she had brought into the restaurant that afternoon. But everyone who witnessed the incident left with something they hadn't possessed before: a deeper understanding that true courage rarely looks dramatic. More often, it looks like refusing to surrender your dignity while others expect you to. Moments like these remind us that discrimination and intimidation don't always begin with grand gestures. Sometimes they start with one person believing another deserves less respect, less humanity, or less dignity, and they end only when ordinary people decide they will no longer tolerate that behavior. The next time you see someone being singled out, mocked, or treated unfairly, what choice will you make? Because history isn't changed only by heroes. Sometimes it's changed by ordinary people who decide that silence is no longer an option.